Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to part 4 of our 6-part Iconic Masters full set review. Today we're going to look at all of the red cards, and we've already looked at white, blue, and black, so we're going to continue marching on today, and then over the course of the next few days we'll finish things up with green and then the colorless cards. Now, if you saw the other parts, you know what to expect here. We're going to look at each card individually and first and foremost talk about its benefits for you in draft and sealed. Now, since these are all reprints, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on constructed formats because we kind of know what these cards do here. I also want to point out there's really no bad cards here. Like, there's no card that I'm going to say just don't play this or skip it. Some of them are a little more niche and only fit into certain deck builds, and we'll talk about that and what archetypes they're best in. But there's probably no card here that I'm going to say just skip it, don't play it all, because this set is really stacked. All right, with that being said, quickly before we get started, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. You'll also find our Amazon products linked below. If you make any purchases through those links, we'll get a small percentage. Finally, Flipside Gaming, who's given a promo code to our viewers. You can save a lot of money there and a lot of pre-orders right now that they have available. Things like Iconic Masters, you have the dual decks, all sorts of things. So check that out. With that out of the way, let's get into the cards for today. We're going to begin with Anger of the Gods. Wow, pretty big card to begin with here. So Anger of the Gods is a fantastic kind of quasi-board sweep. It takes care of the small creatures, actually exiles them. It is double-sided, though, keep that in mind. So where does this really fit? Well, it might not be great for you all the time in a Boros build, but you know what? Even if I am playing something like a Boros build, a lot of small aggro creatures, like, this is still decent in some ways because sometimes it's just a good panic button. Things aren't going right for me. So I might just run this and still be fine with it. It's going to be better, though, probably in like Rakdos builds. You're going to be playing larger creatures like a lot of dragons, for example. Then Anger of the Gods is probably not going to hurt you as much as it potentially could hurt your opponent. Same thing with green, actually, because there's a lot of ways to get +1/+1 counters on your creatures. So this might not hurt you as much as it could hurt an opponent in situations like that. Battle Rattle Shaman, aside from having one of the best names to say in the set, it's actually a really good aggressive card. Great in red-white decks because you're going to have a lot of small creatures getting in for damage. This is going to bolster that damage early on, and then a lot of times those decks will wrap things up with some direct damage. Fits perfectly into that game plan. This is also good in some of the Izzet builds because they're going to have some prowess creatures and different instants and sorceries that will buff them. And on top of that, sometimes there's even things that make them unblockable for a turn. So imagine just playing some sort of like combat trick on a prowess creature and then also attacking the +2/+0 on top of it. That could be a pretty good swing. So overall, just a great card to interact with your other creatures. Bogadan Hellkite. Okay, first dragon of the day. Spoiler alert, there's going to be more coming. There's also going to be a lot of Dragon Matters cards that we'll see in red, much like we saw in black. So as you can imagine, there is a Dragon Matters theme that goes on in Rakdos, which is actually pretty interesting because there's a lot of tribal in this set. But the only tribal that really has strong synergy are the dragons. Like, you see demons, you see angels, you see hydras, but they're not really doing a whole lot. And of course, sphinxes, don't want to forget sphinxes, but they're kind of all working on their own, where the dragons are actually working together. So Rakdos is the colors for that, but even if you're not in those colors, this is still just a solid creature. Like, imagine this maybe in a Gruul deck too, where you have a little bit of ramp behind it, get it out a little bit quicker. Could be good there, but as long as your deck can afford the sort of high casting cost, and depending on what your curve's doing, this is still runnable probably almost anywhere. Borderland Marauder, great aggro card. Again, this is going to be perfect for the white and red decks. You're going to see this 1/2, 2-drop, quickly attack in for 3. It's a 3/2, and you'll be really, really happy with this card. Again, it doesn't have to just be Boros. You can play this in other builds too because it is a really good 2-drop, and that's a critical spot in your curve. Charmbreaker Devils. Alright, now this of course interacts with instant and sorcery cards. So you want to have enough targets in your deck if you're going to run this, especially considering this does cost 6 mana for a 4/4 base. So you want to definitely exploit the abilities if you're going to run this. But if you can exploit the abilities, it's a very, very solid card. So I'm thinking, it's going to be great there, for example, because you are going to, again, have a lot of different like instants and sorceries, whether it's direct damage or just combat effects for your prowess creatures, stuff like that. You're able to recycle those and also bolster this creature while you do it. It seems perfect for that deck. Also makes sense too in Boros is a higher end card though. Keep that in mind. You don't necessarily want to get too many high end cards in a Boros build typically, but this one might be fine if this is what you have to choose from, because you know you're going to have some direct damage going into the graveyard too from time to time. It's important to note too that there is a level of variance with this card because you're not selecting the card coming out of your graveyard. It is at random, but I don't think that's a deal breaker for the Charmbreaker, just simply because if it's a card that I'm getting out of there, even if it's not one of my choosing, it's still card advantage, and if it's in my deck, I'm probably going to be pretty happy to just get it as a bonus card. Sure, there are times you may want a very specific card and you can't seem to grab it, and that might be annoying, but I don't think that matters all that much or is not going to make me not play this card. So overall, a good card. It's not going to be for all builds, though, so just kind of know your deck. Coordinated Assault, another good aggressive card. Giving 2 of your creatures +1/+0 and first strike at instant speed for just 1 mana is a big surprise. Really good combat trick. Again, it doesn't necessarily just have to be Boros, though. I mean, look at Izzet. Izzet is an interesting deck because it is very spell heavy, but it also has this kind of weird sort of aggressive side to it because some of the damage is being done by those prowess creatures and such, and some of the spells are actually meant to help them get across their damage. So it makes sense really in both of those builds, but again, it's just a solid combat trick just generally. Crucible of Fire. Okay, here we go with dragons again. Perfect for Rakdos. If you have a fair amount of dragons, of course, this is going to bolster those dragons. If you already have 1 or 2 dragons on the battlefield, put this down for 4. You could be striking in for a lot of damage just kind of out of nowhere. And here's another dragon card, Draconic Roar. However, this one's a little different because it's not just about dragons. Like, this is a good card even if you don't have any dragons in your deck. I mean, for 2 casting costs, instant speed, 3 damage to a creature, you're going to be happy to run that probably almost all the time, right? If you can reveal a dragon, wonderful. The opponent also takes 3. Nice little bonus, but not necessary for the card to be good. Works better maybe in Rakdos Dragons, but it's good anywhere. Dragon Egg. You know we're in the D's here. A lot of dragons. So, okay. This counts as a dragon itself, so very relevant again in Rakdos. This card can be a little bit annoying for your opponent to play against because they have to make that decision. Is it okay to attack in, get some damage across, but let you sacrifice this and then get the 2/2 flyer with the pump ability? And they have to really think about combat when that happens and what they can do to protect themselves too. I do want to point out a couple other things about this card aside the fact that it's a dragon. It's also a defender, and there is a little bit of a Defender Matters theme in here. You're going to see at least another card in red where it's kind of good to have additional defenders. And you also see some of these cards both in blue as well as green. As a matter of fact, Simic has a little Defender Matters thing going on. So you could find some synergies, either splashing red a little bit into a basic Simic deck, or even just finding synergies in your Izzet colors or in your Gruul colors with something like this. But again, of course, this is great for Rakdos too, so another card that's very, very versatile in this particular set. Dragon Tempest, more dragon stuff. This is a great enchantment for the dragon deck. Now again, this one doesn't have to have dragons, like even if you just have a lot of flyers, like this is still very playable for the haste ability here. But if you have dragons, of course, that's where this card's really going to shine and be something that you're definitely going to want to run. So best in Rakdos, but could be okay in some other builds too. It just depends on your deck. Dragonlord Servant. Okay, another one. This one's fantastic for just powering out those dragons faster. So immediately you think about Rakdos. But again, red has enough dragons that you might find value in this even if you're not playing black. Maybe you're playing Gruul, but you have some dragons. And accompanied with some ramp, this card could really shine perhaps to get some of these bigger dragons out quicker. So yeah, keep an eye on this one for not just Rakdos, but some other opportunities just within the color red itself. But yeah, this is going to be even better if you're really all in on Rakdos Dragons. Earth Elemental. Interesting card here. This is one of the original Alpha Beta Unlimited Magic cards. It's just a curve filler in this set. Like, it's not doing anything crazy or special. It's a 4 or 5 for 5. Sometimes you just need a substantial creature at your 5 spot. If you need it, it's there. If not, maybe you use something else. Alright, Fireball, another one of the original cards from Alpha Beta Unlimited, a very, very powerful card, it's just super versatile. You can just pump a bunch of mana in this, do direct damage to an opponent, you can do the damage to a creature if you need to, you can split damage if you pay a little more mana between creatures, or split it between creatures and players. Just a phenomenal, versatile card that fits in so many places. Good in Boros because sometimes those decks tend to lose ground later in the game and you need to get those last few points of damage across. Great in Gruul because there's ramp strategies there to make this bigger faster. There's also a little card in the set called Channel, which is a mythic that you may have heard of the combo Channel Fireball before. I don't know. Perhaps. Maybe you did. It's really good. Try it out if you can. But even aside from that, it's going to be hard to get that combo, obviously. But if you do, wonderful. You're having a good day. If not, though, there's still plenty to do with Fireball. And you don't even have to combo with this thing. Just throwing this in any deck is just good. Furnace Whelp. Okay, another dragon. So this one's kind of awkward, though, for me. It's a 2/2 for 4. That feels a little overcosted, even though, yes, you get the fire breathing effect. So I'm only playing this if I'm really, truly all in on dragons and feel comfortable running this in the 4 spot over other things. Gruul, yeah, I might be able to get some quicker mana there, like maybe put my lands out a little bit faster, stuff like that, so the fire breathing might become a little more deadly. But again, I don't know if that's going to put it over the top for me with this card necessarily. This is maybe one of the weaker ones we'll look at today. Fury Charm. I love cards with modes. I say that all the time. I'm sure you heard it before. But this is just another great one. I mean, you have all these options here. Destroy an artifact, takes care of a problematic artifact, and it doesn't have to be a sideboard card because you have these other options. Target creature gets +1/+1 against trample until end of turn. That's going to be great when you're pouring +1/+1 counters on stuff in like your Gruul build or something like that, right? And you can just get that extra damage across with the trample if your creature doesn't have evasion. Or remove 2 time counters from target permanent or suspended card. And there are suspend cards in the set. You're going to find at least one more in red today. There's actually a number of them in green because green and red working together is all about efficiency. They use ramp to some degree, but they're also using suspend to try to make some big plays in the middle to late portion of the game. So it's kind of cool how they're intertwining those 2 strategies to do that. So it works really well in that deck, but there's other suspend cards like, for example, we saw Ancestral Vision in blue. So if you have a target for this, even better. But again, so much versatility, you'll be happy to run this in a lot of different places. Gutter Snipe. Gutter Snipe is just a solid card. Like 2/2 for 3, but whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So again, you're already thinking this card is going to be a little bit better in Izzet. It's going to be a little bit better in Boros probably. But at the end of the day, even if you don't have a ton of instant or sorcery spells in your deck, getting a 2/2 body for 3, even if this only activates once, you probably got your money's worth for it. So keep that in mind when you're trying to fill out your curve. Hammerhand. This is an okay aura. I'm a little nervous about auras sometimes. I don't want to get 2 for 1, but what's nice about this is it only costs 1. And on top of that, it does give you an ability when it enters the battlefield. So even if your creature gets destroyed, you're still getting something out of it, perhaps, as long as you're attacking in with more than just the one creature. So it's okay. I could see sometimes it not making your cut just because there's so many powerful cards in this set. So it could be a little better in Boros, though, where you're trying to really be aggressive to get that damage across early and fast. Heat Ray. Here's another X spell, so that is worth noting. Now this one's a little more restricted in some ways than Fireball, but it is an instant card, but this one is purely creature destruction, so it deals X damage to target creature. But you know what? Again, that's good enough. Better than Gruul, perhaps, but good no matter what you're doing. Hoarding Dragon. Okay, here's another dragon. This one's a 5-drop, and it's at uncommon. So if you're looking for a 5-drop dragon to fill out your curve, well, 5-drop dragon, that's hard to say, to fill out your curve, this is a good one. And the whole ability about searching for an artifact can be relevant. I mean, you might have a great artifact that you want to search up. The only thing that's awkward is this has to die then before you get it, which might actually slow you down if it happened to be on top of your deck or something. But it also does create a weird situation. Your opponent has to now decide whether they want this thing to live or die. Do they chump block instead of killing it? Do they just take the damage sometimes because they're concerned about that artifact that you may be getting out of it? So yeah, this can be a decent card. Again, there's so many powerful cards. This isn't maybe one of the more powerful ones, especially if you don't have a good artifact to search up. It might not make your cut. But again, it does have a lot of utility, definitely in Rakdos especially. Keldon Halberdier. This is an awesome aggressive card. This is fantastic. First off, it has Suspend, so relevant with the charm we just saw. 5 casting costs, 4/1, first strike. That's really good on its own. But I like the Suspend option here. 1 red, 4 turns later, it comes into play. And remember, when a creature with Suspend comes into play, it comes into play with haste. So you do get a little bit of this bonus charge out of it when it enters the battlefield here that you wouldn't get if you hard cast it. So that's important to remember when it comes to kind of figuring out how to cast this, when to cast it, whether to use Suspend or not, right? So ultimately, though, Boros decks are going to love having this. This is just perfect for that deck. But again, it doesn't have to be there. This is going to work in a lot of different builds for you very well. Now, aside from that, yes, it is a little fragile with 1 toughness, but it's going to be really hard to kill this in combat with the first strike. Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. This is our first red mythic of the day, and yeah, this is a good card, definitely for constructed Magic. Everyone's probably pretty familiar with how degenerate this card can be with other cards when it comes to constructed formats. But what can it do in limited for you? Well, I'm not expecting this card to just win you the game out of nowhere, like you can do sometimes in a constructed build. But what this card can do is maybe find some incremental advantages for you. First thing you want to ask yourself is, are you okay with a 3 on-color casting cost with a 3 red? If you are, and you feel like you can put that into your deck, then start looking for cards that really work well with this. It could be simple things like enters the battlefield effects, because you can just create a token of the creature with a good effect. It goes away at the end step, but sure, you can just do that every turn if you wanted to and continue to create that same effect over and over. Or maybe it's just simply a good creature to attack with that you can make a token of every turn. It's kind of like attacking with another copy of it. Sure, it goes away at the end of turn, but it doesn't matter. You can do it again the next turn. So yeah, I do think there are advantages to this card. You just have to find them and play it in the right deck. Kiln Fiend, another great card for both Boros as well as Izzet, and other things too, because again, it's a good 2-drop. But what's great about this, a 1/2 for 2, play an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +3/+0 till end of turn. You can get across for some crazy damage. Boros is going to be throwing out some burn spells here and there, maybe clearing a path for something like this to get in and do extra damage. And of course, Izzet is going to be fantastic too, because there's going to be a lot of spell matters, heavy spell stuff in that build. Magus of the Moon, another welcome reprint here. This card was getting pretty expensive as well. So here's the thing. Where do you use this though in Limited? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is I board this in if my opponent's getting greedy. If they're going deep into a third color, if they're going 4 colors, they're going 5 colors, they're using a lot of the dual lands that are available in the set, then yeah, Magus of the Moon's coming in and I'm going to burn you for being greedy, right? Even if it might hurt me a little bit, if it's going to hurt you more, I'm going for it. The other time you use this, maybe you even main deck this, if it's not going to hurt you that much, because it's just going to be a calculated risk at that point. Now, maybe it doesn't affect your opponent that much. In that case, well, it's still a 2/2, and that's okay. But if you're just playing like a straightforward like rule deck or something, you don't have any non-basic lands, then yeah, go for it. Just play this. And even if you have a few non-basic lands and red's one of your color, that might be fine too. It just depends on the build, right? So kind of know your deck, but yeah, this is main deckable at least some of the time. Definitely watch for opportunities to pull this out of the sideboard though. Mark of Mutiny. Threatened effects are always good. I always like them. This one I thought was always a tad awkward because it gives the creature a +1/+1 counter, which actually is relevant with some of the things that are going on in Gruul, for example. But at the same time, you don't want to give the creature back with that counter. I don't know, and you still pay 3 for the spell, even though it feels like the spell is weaker than some of the other threatened effects, even though it isn't 2 red. They did do 1 red and 2. But with that being said, I mean, these effects are still good, and sometimes they can even be game winning, so know your deck. You can play this, but I think a lot of times I skip it for some other stuff. Monastery Swiftspear, one of the better aggro cards that's come along in recent years. Fantastic card for the Boros aggro decks, and again, even for like the Izzet builds and other things too. But definitely, I mean, the prowess is going to be great in Izzet, but definitely a card that I want to have in my Boros deck. Pillar of Flame, another really good direct damage card. You could argue maybe a little better in Izzet or in Boros decks, but really good anywhere. Prodigal Pyromancer. This is a plane shifted card in Planar Chaos. It was a take, of course, on Prodigal Sorcerer, and in a lot of ways it makes more sense as a red card than a blue card. But overall, this is always good in Limited. Like, I'm always really happy to play this. Little Fragile is a 1/1, but if you put this into play, it really has to make your opponent think about not only combat, but what kind of clock they're on, because it can ping them at the end of turns if there's nothing else going on. It has to make them think about what creatures they can play. They can't really play 1 toughness creatures very effectively anymore. If you happen to get 2 of these on the battlefield, now it becomes 2 toughness creatures. So this is a really annoying card, and sometimes it's just a cheap little card your opponent ends up having to use a burn spell on. Rift Bolt, another fantastic direct damage card. This one has Suspend, and you can suspend this just for 1 turn for 1 red, do 3 damage to creature or player, wonderful, or you just pay the 3, it's good either way. Again, sure, it has synergies with some of the spell matter stuff that you're going to find in like Izzet. It's going to be good in Boros to finish off opponents, but still, good anywhere. Ryusai the Falling Star. Okay, here's the Kamigawa Dragon that's in red. We have the whole cycle here at rare. This one's good, maybe not as good as some of the others though, because yes, it's a 5/5 flyer for 6, that's very good. But when it dies, it deals 5 damage to each creature without flying. Sometimes that might hurt you, so it is reciprocal, keep that in mind. Now, if you're in the right deck, however, maybe it's the Rakdos Dragon deck, for example, and you're getting the extra push from this being a dragon, then yeah, you might not have that many creatures on the ground you're concerned about. You might just be more concerned about your big dragons that are in the air and it's not going to affect them. So if that's the case, this card becomes a little bit better. But again, know your deck. Maybe this isn't good in a Boros deck if you got a lot of small ground creatures. Scourge of Valkas, another really solid dragon for that Rakdos deck. It's still good outside of that deck. I mean, it's still a 4/4 flyer for 5, even though it is 3 on color with fire breathing. That can be good in a lot of builds. But if you have that extra dragon synergy, being able to deal that damage to creatures or players is just really good. Splatter Thug. Hey, it's an Unleashed card. We saw a lot of these in black when we did that episode. This one's a first striker, though. So it's either a 2/2 for a striker or a 3/3 for a striker. They can't block. That's actually super aggressive. So this is going to feel really good in Boros just for aggro purposes. But don't forget, too, that +1/+1 counter matters theme is in green. So this is a great Gruul card, too. And as a matter of fact, if you look at Golgari and maybe even splash a little red into a basic Golgari deck, this could really have a lot of good synergies there, too, with some of the other Unleashed creatures you see. And cards like the Corpse Jack Menace we looked at the other day, too. I mean, this card can be really good with the right cards around it, but it's still good in a vacuum on its own, too. Stagger Shock. Okay, this is a rebound direct damage card, so it's probably going to be, again, a little bit better than like Is It, where you have prowess creatures and you have different abilities that come up from playing non-creature spells or instants or sorceries and such. So, of course, keep that in mind. Look for those synergies. But again, another card that crosses over well basically into almost any deck. Surreal Memoir. I like the name of that. Surreal Memoir. This one is a sorcery, but again, it has rebound and it allows you to recur an instant card at random. So there's variance here from your graveyard to your hand. I'm not always a big fan of variance, but again, at some point it just doesn't matter. Like, it's just an extra card and you get to do this twice actually with a rebound. So hey, why not go for it, right? So you do want to have a fair amount of instants or you're not going to run this. This is probably going to be in your Is It deck, maybe your Boros deck. But again, if you don't have enough targets for this, you may want to skip it. Thunderball Hellkite, another mythic. This one, another very, very welcome reprint. Huge dragon here for the Rakdos deck. But you know what? This is awesome no matter what you're playing. If you can swing the casting cost, if you're playing red, in other words, go ahead and play this. 5/5 for 5, flying and haste. Oh, and also, too, when it enters the battlefield, is 1 damage to each creature with flying your opponent controls, and you get to tap them down. Get in there for a big strike. All your dragons can swarm in there. It's awesome. But again, doesn't have to be dragons. This is still good on its own. Fantastic card. Tormenting Voice. This is a good card. Sometimes it doesn't make my cut in limited, but I always try to work it in. Sometimes discarding a card isn't necessarily a drawback, or at the very least, it's not that bad of a drawback. Depends on what you're throwing away. I mean, there are some cards that do interact or come out of the graveyard. We saw some of that in black, so keep that in mind. You can mitigate that slightly, but this isn't necessarily what I would consider a draw card as much as it's a selection card. You're tossing something away and you're replacing this card for the next 2 cards in your library. You're just digging deeper. You're going faster through your deck. Sometimes that's just good enough. So if I can run one of these, I try to do so. Again, it's going to work really nice when sorceries and instants matter, but it doesn't need to be there. Trumpet Blast, great card if you're going wide and you're trying to get a whole bunch of damage across, maybe even to finish off a game. It's an instant speed play. It can really take your opponent off guard sometimes. So this is awesome. First and foremost, I'm thinking Boros, but really good in Is It too with the prowess creatures and such. But again, if you have creatures and you're going wide, this is even splashable. Again, in a traditional Golgari build, could be really good there too. Urabrask the Hidden. Well, here's the Praetor for red, and this, of course, is a mythic. Again, this is another full cycle that you'll find in the set. This one is a little cheaper than some of the others. It's also maybe not quite as splashy, but it's still really solid. Pay 5 for a 4/4. It has haste, so keep that in mind. That's actually super aggressive. And then on top of that, all your other stuff has haste. And now your opponent's creatures come to play tap too. So this is a nice kind of attrition card to just get more damage across and really bolster an aggressive deck. So this could be a higher end portion of your Boros deck maybe to, again, just keep the pressure on your opponent. Fent Sentinel. Here's a defender that has a Defender Matters theme attached to it. But even on its own, it might be okay just to ping an opponent here and there to try to whittle them down slowly. You can see some of that strategy in red, like with the Prodigal Pyromancer, for example. So yeah, the card just generally is fine. And then beyond that, there are synergies with other defenders. So if you have some other good defenders to play along with it, the card gets better and the value definitely goes up, becomes more playable. All right, let's move on to some multicolor with Roshin Meander. First and foremost, I like to say I love when they reprint cards from this era of Magic because it was a low print run era. Always nice to have reprints. Now, the card itself, 4 casting cost, and you have some flexibility on color here. You get yourself a 4/4. That's actually pretty decent. Like, that's a nice curve filler no matter what, right? Now let's look at the rest of the card. It is legendary, so keep that in mind. But you can tap it to add 4 colorless mana, but you can only use that to play an X spell. So great for Fireball, great for Heat Ray, other cards as well. We're about to look at another one in just a second here. but this is fantastic to go into that Gruul ramp strategy. Savageborn Hydra. Here's another X-Spell, and imagine that. This is also a really good one. This is a creature, but it gets counters based on how much you pay into it, and it has double strike. And you can also pay later to get more counters if you choose to. And again, you have the flexibility and color there, which is pretty sweet. So, yes, Savageborn Hydra is a beating if you can get this card out. Again, obviously perfect for Gruul. It's trying to ramp into some bigger plays. This is definitely a huge play to work into. Let's move on to Boros with Firemane Angel. This is just a great aggressive card. 4/3, flying, first strike, you gain a little life off of it. You have the ability to pull it out of the graveyard later. It's a little expensive, but it's there anyway. But regardless, yeah, you're going to play this in a Boros deck, be super happy with it. It's going to be higher end of your curve there. But you can even splash some red maybe, play this in other builds, and be real happy with it. What's on top of the deck? It's Lightning Helix. Great card. You're going to play this any opportunity you can get to play it. It has a life gain element, so keep that in mind. It has good synergy with other white cards, but just overall, if you can work this into your deck, do so. The card's fantastic. Alright, with that being said, those are the cards for today. We made it through the red. We're going to be back with our next episode soon to look at all the green cards, and then we'll close things out with all the colorless cards in the set. Hopefully get you prepared for some drafts and some seals you might be playing once this product's released. So until next time though, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.